What's going on, guys? It's Zach here, bringing you guys another fantasy football video. So I'm going to be going over my top 7 players to target in trades this week. These are guys that I'm really looking to buy low on after what's arguably been a disappointing first 2 weeks of the NFL season. Obviously, the first 2 weeks are by no means going to be an end-all be-all in terms of how these players are going to end up at the conclusion of the season. So I think it's a really good opportunity to sort of take advantage of what we've learned over the last 2 weeks and take advantage of what overreactions might be occurring and really apply that into players that we can, add onto our rosters and give ourselves a better shot at competing for a championship at the end of the season. So trading is one of my favorite ways to just improve teams in fantasy football. It's probably my favorite part of fantasy football as well. I'm probably the guy in most leagues that's sending out the most trade offers every single week, the guy that really just tries to take the shotgun approach on the trading front and really just trusting myself to win more than half of my trades. And I understand that if I make enough of them and I do actually tend to know what I'm doing, then it ends up really improving my roster, and it really just makes the whole thing a lot more fun. It makes the league a lot more active, keeps things fun. So really love doing these videos as well. It really helps me just sort of identify which players I'm looking to target in trades as well. I certainly apply all these players to my own teams as well. I'm certainly sending out trade offers for all of these guys over the course of this week, and I really do think you guys should be doing that as well. I am, again, this week splitting the videos up in between the buy lows and sell highs, so if you guys haven't seen the video going over some players I think I should be selling high on this week, feel free to watch that one as well. They'll both come out on the same day, so whichever one you watch first, go watch the other one as well. It should be super helpful for you guys. So, yeah, with that being said, let's just get into the first player here. So starting us off with my favorite buy low candidate after week 2, it's actually going to be Alexander Mattison. I know he's been extremely disappointing over the first 2 weeks of the season. I know that a lot of people are just really fed up with his involvement in the offense. He's been extremely ineffective. He hasn't looked good really at all to this point, and I totally get all of those marks, although I do want to point out that just this last Thursday when I was going over my Thursday Night Football preview, when they played against the Philadelphia Eagles, I actually mentioned that I did think Alexander Mattison would end up on this list for me next week because I was predicting it to be a bit of a down performance for him against the Eagles. The Eagles have one of the best defensive fronts in the NFL. Tampa Bay Buccaneers, with the other defensive front he had to go up against, they're always a really good run defense with Vita Vea on that defensive line, so it's really not all that shocking at this point that we saw him struggle in the first 2 weeks. He's never been a player that's been like an extremely explosive athlete. He's by no means the kind of player that's going to be an extremely efficient runner of the football, but he's good enough in pass protection, good enough in the receiving game, and just reliable enough in general that he's going to continue to get a lot of work. They don't really have anybody else in this backfield that's going to push him for touches. Ty Chandler is a decent little player, but he's by no means a legitimate threat to what we're going to see for him over the course of the season. So with that being said, we're going to continue to see Alexander Mattison get like 15 to 20 touches, be involved as a pass catcher, and he's going to get the goal line work and what's a really good offense. And what's great about that is the next couple of weeks, the Vikings are really fantastic. They get games against the Chargers and the Raiders each of the next 2 weeks. Those are games that I expect the Chargers or the Vikings to put up quite a few points in. I think the touchdowns are finally going to come for Alexander Mattison. I wouldn't be shocked at all to see him put up 2 touchdowns this week against what's generally a mediocre run defense in Los Angeles. And on top of that, Alexander Madison's just extremely cheap right now. I think he's going to be like a high-end running back 2 the rest of the season, and he's by no means costing that. And with all these running back injuries, I think a lot of people are really scrambling looking for a running back to buy. And if you're in that position, I think Alexander Mattison is absolutely the best target right now. Next up, we've got A.J. Brown on this list. The touchdowns just really haven't come yet for A.J. Brown. He's still been extremely involved in this offense. He leads this team in target share, believe it or not. He's got a 30% target share on the season, just ahead of Devonta Smith with a 28% target share. Devonta Smith's just been extremely efficient so far. He's caught 2 touchdowns over the first 2 weeks, and that makes it look like Devonta Smith's been the much better player. We had A.J. Brown get a touchdown called back due to a holding penalty last week that didn't have to happen. The Eagles' passing game as well just really hasn't looked all that great, and I think that there's a lot of people that are maybe a little bit concerned that under a new offensive coordinator, they might not be the same passing offense as they were last season. That's possible for sure, but I still think this Eagles offense is going to be totally fine. They've got games in the next 3 weeks up against the Buccaneers, the Commanders, and Rams. Those are 3 defenses that you can really attack through the air, and I'd expect the Eagles to have a lot more passing yards over the next 3 weeks than they did in the first 2. I think it's going to be a really nice stretch for A.J. Brown, certainly a scenario where you could see A.J. Brown start putting up some week-winning performances. Sooner or later, he's due for a 6 for 150 and 2 game. That could happen this week easily against the Buccaneers defense, who really hasn't been all that great at this point in the season. And on top of that, the Buccaneers offense actually looks good enough that they can actually compete and put up points and make this game a potential shootout next week. I really do want A.J. Brown on my rosters. I still view him as a low-end wide receiver 1 for the rest of the season, and I don't think he's going to cost you all that right now. I think a lot of people are a little bit worried about him so far, and he's definitely someone that I just want to target and get on my roster if I can. Up next, we've got what might be my favorite buy low at the wide receiver position at this point in the season, and that's Mike Williams. Mike Williams is someone that's always due for a big, huge game at some point over the course of the season, and we haven't really seen that happen yet. He just had 4 for 45 in week 1, and this last week he ended up with a modest performance. He caught 8 passes for 83 yards. The real thing here, though, is that Mike Williams just hasn't scored a touchdown yet. We saw Keenan Allen score 2 touchdowns this last week, despite Mike Williams actually leading the team in targets with 13. This passing offense is by no means the reason why the Chargers are 0-2. This Chargers offense is going to be completely fine. It sounds like Austin Eckler has no timetable for his return, so this team might have to lean on the passing game even more going forward. And they've got really great matchups over the next several weeks. They play the Vikings this week. Within the next 5 weeks, they get games against the Vikings, Raiders, Eagles, and the Bears. Those are 4 teams that you can really throw the ball against quite a bit. And I think it's certainly a scenario here where Mike Williams is due for potentially that 2-touchdown game just this week. And when that happens, Mike Williams is going to be a guy that I really do think can be like a nice high-end, probably a mid-tier wide receiver 2 for you guys the rest of the season. A guy that's going to be a little bit boomer bust, but can certainly be a league-winning asset for you guys. And he really doesn't cost all that much right now. He's generally viewed as like honestly a boomer bust wide receiver 3 or a flex option by most people in my opinion, and I really do think Mike Williams is much better than that. This offense is actually really good in Los Angeles. I know they're 0-2. I know Herbert hasn't looked spectacular at this point in the season, but I'm still a big believer in this Chargers offense. I still think Mike Williams is going to do for a huge season this year, and on top of that, we haven't really seen Quentin Johnson or Joshua Palmer really establish themselves by any means yet. It seems more and more likely that this is just like a 2-man offense between Keenan Allen and Mike Williams. There's a lot to like about this offense, and I really do want to get as much of it as I can, and Mike Williams seems to be the cheapest piece right now. So go target Mike Williams in trades if you can. Another one of my favorite buy lows right now is actually Jeudy. I know it's been a really disappointing start to the season for him. Obviously, he missed week 1 with a hamstring injury, came back in week 2, a lot of excitement around it, and just really didn't get up to any sort of meaningful fantasy contribution. He played 68% of the snaps, ran around 85% of dropbacks, and there really were no limitations from a health standpoint. It seemed like he was effectively a full-time player in this one, and he just didn't do much. And I'm just going to attribute that to him not being really given a full week of practice. He wasn't really fully integrated into the offensive game plan. Just really hasn't gotten his feet under him yet. But I do truly believe that Jeudy is going to end up being the wide receiver 1 in Denver over the course of the season. This Broncos offense is looking a lot better at this point in the season than it was last season. They just put up 33 points in a game. They're first in the NFL in terms of points scored per drive. This is actually a really good offense, it looks like, in Denver. They are 0-2, but that's really just because this Denver defense has been absolutely atrocious. Same statistic, they have the worst defense in the NFL in terms of points allowed per drive on that front. So I think you're actually going to find the Broncos in quite a few shootouts this season. They got games up against the Chargers and Chiefs going up, obviously. That's going to happen twice this season. They play the Dolphins this week. There are going to be a lot of games this season where the Broncos find themselves scoring 30 to 35 points, and Jeudy is going to be a really big part of that. This offense between Jeudy, Sutton, and Marvin Mims is going to be able to move the ball quite a bit, and I really do think Jeudy is going to be like a reasonably useful wide receiver 2 for you guys over the course of the season, and I really don't think he's going to cost that. He slid in draft capital, so he wasn't drafted very highly, and he's done nothing over the first 2 weeks, so he's probably going to be relatively cheap right now. He's probably like a low-end wide receiver 3 to most people, and I think you can trade that for him, and I really do think Jeudy is going to be a guy that you want to be starting going forward. Next, we've got another wide receiver on this list, and for me, that's Jalen Waddle. I know that Jalen Waddle's been a little bit disappointing so far. He hasn't found the end zone yet. We've seen Tyreek Hill do that in each of the first 2 weeks, and I think a lot of people are really worried that we're sort of seeing what the common fear is out of all drafting these like high-end wide receiver 2s for their teams, the guys like Jalen Waddle, T. Higgins, Devonta Smith. A lot of people are just worried that it's hard for those guys to eat and dominate in an offense that's led by a different receiver, and I think that those fears for a lot of people are being sort of confirmed so far over the first 2 weeks, in that a lot of people are viewing this offense as Tyreek Hill's offense and Jalen Waddle just playing second fiddle. But Jalen Waddle is still an elite player. I still think he's going to be a low-end wide receiver 1 over the course of the season, and sooner or later here he's absolutely going to explode. Assuming he plays this week against the Denver Broncos, we do have to keep in mind that he's dealing with a concussion. I do believe it's likely that he'll suit up in week 3, but keep an eye on that. But that being said, he is going to be lined up across from the lesser of the Broncos cornerbacks. They've obviously got Patrick Surtain on one side. Surtain's going to probably follow Tyreek Hill in this one, and going up against Robert Mathis, I believe, or something Mathis. Mathis is the second cornerback for the Broncos. He's a far downgrade from Patrick Surtain. It's going to be a really great matchup for Jalen Waddle. We've seen plenty of wide receiver 2s play really well so far to this point in the season. We saw Jacoby Myers have a monster performance week 1. This Broncos defense just gave up 35 points to the Commanders, and I think there's just a really realistic opportunity here for Jalen Waddle to end up being a top 5 wide receiver just this week. I think he could easily put up 150 yards and a touchdown in this one, and he's somebody that I really am excited about going forward for the rest of the season. And if you can find the manager in your league who's maybe he's 0-2 and has Waddle on his roster and he's worried that Waddle's going to miss this game, go target Jalen Waddle right now. I think you can pay like a low-end wide receiver 2 price tag, and he's going to be a monster over the second half, or honestly, over the rest of the season, not just the second half of the season. He's someone that I very much want on my rosters, and if he ends up being your wide receiver 2, you are absolutely set at that position. So go target Jalen Waddle right now while he's still somewhat cheap. Next, rather than talk about just one player, I'm going to talk about an entire offense in general, and that's going to be the Bengals offense. I know that it's been really brutal so far. They obviously got absolutely smoked against the Cleveland Browns in week 1, and then they had a really down performance in week 2 against the Baltimore Ravens. I know they sort of salvaged things with a little bit of garbage time at the end. Joe Burrow put it together a little bit and did throw 2 passing touchdowns to T. Higgins, and I know that a lot of people are really worried about the possibility of Joe Burrow missing more time. He's listed as questionable going into week 3, and honestly, I think it's almost likely that he misses a week here. It's even possible that we see Joe Burrow go on IR at some point, and that's going to be really concerning. But the fact of the matter is that when he's healthy, Joe Burrow is an extremely high-end option at the quarterback position. Jamar Chase is a top 3 wide receiver. Higgins is a high-end wide receiver 2. Joe Mixon's a low-end running back 1. Excuse me for the typo there. I should say low-end running back 1. And the fact of the matter is this offense is going to be producing a lot of fantasy points over the second half of the season. If you are 1-1 or even 2-0, I think targeting these guys is certainly something that should be beneficial for you. You don't necessarily need to win at this point. There's no guarantee that these guys even struggle as much as early as week 3. You could easily see this offense just find its footing against a mediocre to bad Rams defense in week 3, and they could really just hit the ground rolling from there. I think this is going to be a much better offense than what we've seen over the first 2 weeks. Remember, they did start 0-2 last season, and there's just a lot of reason for optimism. These guys are too good to turn out poorly. Even if Joe Burrow were to miss time, Jamar Chase and T. Higgins are good enough that you should still be starting them. They'll still be useful. Just picture like what Garrett Wilson did this last week, managing to perform at a high level despite Zach Wilson being the quarterback. Some players are just so good, they're almost quarterback proof. I think these two are. Joe Mixon is certainly going to be volume dependent and will be given enough volume that he'll still be useful even if the offense struggles. And when Burrow comes back and they turn things around, he's going to be some really high-end performers. And if you can trade, lower tier assets for guys on this team, I think they're going to be really valuable for you over the second half of the season or whenever this offense gets their footing, because it will happen. And they're definitely guys that you're going to want over the back half of the season, and they're never going to be cheaper than what they are right now. So I would target pretty much every single one of these guys in this offense, assuming you have at least one win at this point. And finally, the last buy low for me here is actually going to be Kyren Williams. I know a lot of you guys might argue that I'm basically advocating for a buy high here of Kyren Williams. I think that's a fair assessment, but the fact of the matter is, Kyren Williams is the clear-cut running back 1 for the Los Angeles Rams. They've made it very clear that Cam Akers is not going to be a part of their future. He has no competition for touches in this backfield. They've got Ronnie Rivers and Zach Evans behind him. Neither one of those guys is really competent enough to deserve touches in an NFL offense, and that's what showed out this week too. Kyren Williams played 95% of the snaps for this offense. He had 10 targets, got 14 carries. I think we're going to see a lot of that. This is going to be a really pass-heavy offense. It's going to throw the ball short quite often. That's why we're seeing Puka Nacua perform at a high level. That's why Kyren Williams caught 6 passes this last week. And honestly, they're a relatively good offense as well. They're not that bottom-of-the-barrel offense that a lot of people were expecting, and that means they're going to be like a middle-of-the-pack offense. Kyren Williams is going to be given all of the touches, and that's basically the same recipe that we saw for Josh Jacobs last season, a guy who had no competition for touches behind him, wasn't really performing at an elite level on a per touch basis, but was given so much volume and was given enough work, and what ended up being a decent offense that ends up being a top 5 running back over the course of the season. And I really do think we could see a scenario here where Kyren Williams ends up playing that out. I'm not saying Kyren Williams is by any means a top 5 running back the rest of the season, but I do actually view him as a low-end running back 1 the rest of the way. I don't think he's by any means going to cost you that. He's definitely someone that you can be targeting because, people picked him up off waivers. They don't realize what they have really at him yet, and I really do think he's going to be a guy that's going to be a league-winning asset. And before the league managers in your league realize that, go take him from them, be the guy that maybe you didn't get him off waivers, but now you can put him on your team, and you got a really solid running back that a lot of people didn't see coming. So I really am targeting Kyren Williams right now. I would be super excited about having him on my roster. He's somebody that I just really want to get if I can. So that'll do it for the players to be targeting in trades this week. Obviously, I maybe didn't include everybody that you guys might have wanted on this list. So if there's anybody that you guys are looking to buy low on, feel free to let me know in the comments. I'm happy to give you guys my opinions on those. If there's anybody that you disagree with as well, also let me know in the comments. It's super fun interacting with you guys and sort of seeing what you guys have to say as well. Up next, I'll be doing a video where I'm going over players that I'd be selling high on. That video will come out the same day as this one. So make sure you go watch both of those. It should be really useful for you guys to know which players on your rosters you should be trying to trade away and which ones you should be trying to use as pieces to, trade up and get better players off from other rosters. So super fun making these videos. I love making them. After the sell high video, I'll also be putting out a Thursday night breakdown or a Thursday night football primer. That'll come out the following day, and then you guys can get all the access to that. And then Saturday morning as well, I'll be going over every single matchup this week and going over which players I think you should be starting and sitting in that one as well. So to make sure you guys get access to all those videos, please do subscribe to the channel. Really make sure that you get access to all that content. It really helps me out as well. Helps grow the channel. We're at about 850 subscribers right now, which is just super cool. I would love to hit 1,000 by the end of the NFL season. So let's see if we can do that. It might be a tough goal to hit, but I really do think we can get there, and it's been really cool seeing all the support. So yeah, with that being said, I just want to thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll catch you next time. Thank you guys for watching. If you haven't already, please be sure to subscribe to the channel, like the video, check out these other videos here if you haven't. If you want more content, please feel free to follow me on Twitter at RealSteelFFB. I'll be more active on there as the season goes on. Thanks. Catch you later.